look at our relationship with God in that manner. And so again, when we see this concept of God, it's very disturbing that He actually wants to get closer to you. Let's go to the other part. How is it comforting? Okay, we talked about how this concept of a marriage can be very, very disturbing, but let's talk about how this can be very, very comforting. Okay, there's many different ways we could be comforted, but let me just describe one way. Okay, like I told you guys, marriage can be very, very difficult because again, you could lose freedom, or you could go in with amount of fear that someone could reject you. But a marriage can be really, really, really beautiful at the same time. Why? Because when you realize, okay, even though again we're human beings and we're not perfect, when you feel accepted, even though you have shown everything to a person, and they still accept you and they still love you, there's nothing more beautiful than that. And all of us, I think deep down in our hearts, we really desire that. Okay, even the people who wants to keep God away or people away, we don't want people to get closer. But deep down in our hearts, what we really, really want is we want to be known fully, that they know all the crap that we have done, all the garbage we have, and yet to be loved fully as well. Okay, I was listening to an interview of a basketball player. He said, the difference when I was just an average basketball player, but there was a moment where I actually, it leveled up. Okay? And there were two basketball players, and they actually both said, yeah, I remember distinctly when I leveled up. Do you guys know when it was? Anybody else? Anybody? It was actually not marriage. Do you guys know? Okay? You guys, not divorce. Okay? They actually said they became better, okay, when they had kids. Okay? Do you guys know why? Okay, you guys, okay. The reason for them, they said, before, when I shot the basketball wrong or I made a mistake, I would come home and it's like, I would hate myself, right? But with kids, when I had kids, I came home and they didn't care whether I made a bad play or I made a bad shot. They loved me for who I just was. And that gave me the confidence that even if I fail in this, what's going to happen? Then I'm okay. I still have a home to go back to. Does that make sense? So, in that sense, marriage or even a family can be very, very a beautiful thing. Of course, it could go wrong as well because you can expose yourself, and that's what we're scared of. Our fear is if we expose ourselves and they're going to reject us, that really is probably the worst pain that we could have. But on the other hand, if it's really beautiful, okay, where they could see us fully and accept us fully, that becomes a really, really beautiful thing. And that's how we know that home, the concept of home, it's not just a place, right? It's this idea of a place where you actually feel belonging, where you feel accepted. That's where real home is. And you see, in that case, Jeremiah 3 becomes really, really beautiful. Because if you guys see what God is saying here, what does he one thing we understand, for us, how we normally think of it is, God usually says, okay, follow these rules. Okay, or shape up. How dare you do this? But that's not what God says here. What does God say here? He says, return to me. Return to me. Okay, again, it's this concept of a relationship, right? That He wants an intimate relationship with us. He's calling us back home. Okay, and then He gives another illustration of kind of like the prodigal son, right? He's the father and the son has run away. And He's saying, come back home to me, where you could be fully loved and fully known. So for some of us who feel very, very disturbed, maybe you're going through a lot of anxiety, okay? Maybe you feel a lot of guilt and shame. Okay? We clearly see in Jeremiah chapter 2 and chapter 3, God knows all of that. He knows the things that we have done. Okay? He's not surprised by our sins. Okay? He knows that. He knows all of these things. He knows we're scared. He knows some of us are in deep anxiety. He knows that some of us are in deep guilt and shame. But what does he say? He says, return to me. And that becomes really, really beautiful. And just like the basketball star, do you guys see how that kind of concept of God really can give you real self-confidence? Not like the self-help book self-confidence, but the real self-confidence, real hope, real security that's going to give you power to walk through your life. Do you see that? Just like that NBA player, again, before it was, if I fail at this, if I don't make this shot, if I don't look certain way, if I don't make certain amount of money, then I'm nobody. And maybe some of you guys have heard that growing up. Maybe your parents have said it. Maybe, and social media, everything else continues to tell us, you gotta act a certain way, you gotta be a certain thing, you gotta shape up before you come to God. But again, God is calling us, come back. Come back. And again, that gives us tremendous amount of comfort. Like I have talked about last week, the best way to understand not just the book of Jeremiah, but really the whole book of the Bible, again, is to really understand. Okay, the best way to understand it is for us to realize that we're like the wife, we are like the lost son who's continuing to run away. Yesterday we were having a Vespers and we were having a discussion. I think this is one of the best ways to understand it. Okay, it's like this. For a lot of us, what we do is, I think we gave an example of the Amazon kid, right? Okay, so imagine if you guys, all of us, okay, imagine if there was a person that is a son of Amazon. Amazon, what's his name? Jeff Bezos? Yeah. So imagine there was a son or a daughter, okay? And that person says, I don't want anything to do with you, Jeff. I want to do whatever I want. And he or she goes away, okay? And digging through trash cans, okay? Digging through, like begging for food or, begging for money. Why? So that he or she could buy stuff on Amazon. Okay, would that make sense? Would you go, wow, you're a smart kid? No. You go, why would you do that? With your dad, you have everything. Everything provided for you. Why do you continue to run away? And try to satisfy your heart with all of these things when God can actually satisfy you. You see, again, if we look at the Bible, if you look at your relationship with God in that kind of a lens, that's what's going to really transform our hearts. Again, if you go back and just say, okay, I have to just follow a bunch of these rules, then again, that's not going to change your heart. If you go back and say, I have to do a bunch of these things, that's not going to change your heart. And that's why I think Jeremiah is really, really beautiful. Because it helps us to see how destructive sin is in our lives, how we're continuing to dig through trash cans, even though we think it's gold. We're digging through trash can. Okay, while gold is offered to us, we're continuing to look at the trash can. What God is calling us to do is to stop and to come back home. And that's the concept of God that we continually have to see. That God is willing, okay, to come down to this earth, to die for our sins, and to forgive us. And He's calling us back home. You see, the prodigal son story is really, really beautiful to a lot of us. But more accurate picture of the prodigal son is not just that the dad ran out, but the dad actually came all the way to where the pigs were at. And he said, you don't have to do this anymore. Okay, instead, I'll do this for you. I'll pay off your debt by working here. You get off. And this is what God is offering to all of us. He's saying, return back to me. I want to satisfy you. Stop trying so hard. Everything that you need,